The cell was cold. The air smelled like metal and smoke. In the center of the small prison cage sat a girl with silver hair and glowing violet eyes. Her name was Princess Valora of Elindra, heir to one of the oldest royal bloodlines in the galaxy. But now no one called her a princess. Her crown was broken. Her royal robe was torn. Her hands were chained behind her back and her knees were scraped and bleeding. She had not spoken in days. Her voice had become silent, just like her spirit. Guards passed her cage and laughed. So this is the great Elindran princess? She looks more like a stray animal now. Another said, "The High Warlord will sell. Her to the slavers of Kratak. They'll pay well for someone like her." Valora didn't even flinch. She had heard worse. Once, millions had bowed when she entered a room. Now no one even cared she was alive. Suddenly, a loud metallic bang echoed across the prison chamber. A new prisoner was being thrown into the cell across from hers. He landed hard on the floor, coughing. The guards laughed again. "Stupid human. Shouldn't have entered our space." Valora opened her eyes just a little and looked at him. The human sat up slowly, holding his side in pain. His face was rough, covered in bruises and dried blood. One eye was swollen, but there was something strange in his look. He didn't seem afraid. He looked around, then stared right at her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then the human gave her a weak smile and said, "Nice cage. Yours are rented." Valora blinked. She was too shocked to reply. "I'm Blake," he continued. "Sergeant, Human Army. I think we're roommates now." She turned her head away. She didn't want to talk. She didn't trust humans either. Her people had fought many wars against them. They were known to be wild and violent, but he didn't seem like a monster. Later that night, the prison chamber grew quiet. The lights dimmed. Most guards left for their shift change. Only one officer stayed behind, a cruel alien with yellow eyes and sharp claws. He walked toward her cage, grinning. "You're too beautiful to rot in there," he hissed. "Maybe I should take you to my room instead." Valora backed up against the wall. She didn't have weapons. She didn't even have the strength to scream. The alien pressed a button. Her cage door began to open slowly. That's when it happened. A loud clang rang through the cell block. The guard froze. He turned and saw Blake charging straight at him, using a broken pipe he had pulled from the cell wall. The alien tried to strike, but Blake ducked, rolled forward, and smashed the pipe against his head. Once, twice, a third time. The guard collapsed. Dead. Blake was breathing hard, his face pale. Valora stared at him in shock. "You all right, princess?" he asked, holding out a hand. She didn't move. Why did you help me?" she finally whispered. Blake looked down at the dead alien, then at her. "Because I've seen what monsters do to people who can't fight back." He broke her, chains with the guard's weapon, gently pulling her to her feet. "We need to move," he said. "They'll find the body soon." Valora limped beside him, still confused. "You're human, and I'm Elindran. We're enemies." Blake smiled. "Right now we're just two prisoners trying not to die. That makes us partners." As they crept through the prison corridors, alarms began to sound. Guards discovered the body. Red lights flashed across the halls. "Come on." Blake grabbed her hand and pulled her into a dark tunnel. Explosions echoed in the distance. The warship was massive, but he moved like he knew where to go. Valora held his hand tightly. For the first time in days, she felt a strange feeling. Hope. The human had no plan, no army, and no reason to help her. But still, he had saved her. And her tears, long frozen inside, finally fell. The lights of the warship turned blood red. Sirens screamed. Metal doors slammed shut. Alien voices shouted orders in a language the princess couldn't understand. And in the middle of that chaos, a human and a princess ran for their lives. Blake held Valora's hand tightly. Her steps were uneven, her feet bruised and bare. But she didn't complain. She only kept running. Behind them, the alien soldiers were closing in. They turned a corner and ducked into a dark storage room. Blake closed the door softly and pressed his back against it, breathing hard. Valora leaned on a wall, her silver hair messy, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "We won't last long like this," she whispered. Blake gave a tired grin. "Don't say that, you're royalty. Aren't you trained to keep hope alive or something?" "I was trained to give speeches and wear gold," she said flatly. "Not crawl through enemy ships with bleeding feet." Blake laughed quietly. Even in that dangerous moment, he looked around and spotted an old supply crate. Inside were maintenance uniforms, wires, and, luckily, a stolen map tablet. He tossed one of the uniforms to Valora. "Put that on. They're looking for a princess, not a low-class mechanic." Valora raised a brow. "You want me to dress like one of your human prisoners?" "No," Blake said, turning away to give her privacy. "I want you to survive." Moments later, they stepped back into the corridor. With new clothes and a stolen pass card from the guard Blake had killed, they moved silently. But the ship was alive now, searching for them. Through the walls, they heard the alien captain's voice. "The human has taken the royal. All units. Kill the human, recover the princess, use force." Valora looked at Blake. "They will kill you, all because of me." Blake stopped walking. "No, they'll kill me because I make them afraid." She frowned. "Afraid? You're just one man." Blake gave her a strange look. "That's exactly why they're afraid." He led her down to the lower levels, places most aliens never went. Here the ship was filled with strange creatures locked in cages. Broken machines sparked. The air was thicker, dirtier. "Where are we?" Valora asked. Blake knelt beside a large pipe. "Maintenance, tunnels. I saw the layout earlier. If we're lucky, we can reach the cargo bay and grab an escape pod. And if we're not lucky, then we die in a blaze of glory. Either way, I get to punch a few more aliens. So I'm good." Valora gave a small smile. "You humans are strange." "No, we're just free." They crawled through the tunnels, sometimes stepping over rotting food or broken wires. Once, they had to stay completely still while a group of guards walked past the vent above them. Valora tried not to breathe. Her body was shaking. She was scared. Not of death, but of losing this strange connection she was starting to feel with Blake. Finally, they reached the edge of the ship's cargo zone. Blake peered through the hatch and whispered, "2 guards. I'll distract them. You go left." "No," Valora said quickly. "You'll be killed." Blake winked. "Not if I do it right." He kicked the hatch open and ran forward, shouting, "Hey, you looking for me, ugly?" The guards turned in shock, but Blake was already moving. He threw one into a stack of boxes. The second tried to shoot, but Valora came from behind and hit him with a metal rod Blake had handed her earlier. The room went quiet. Blake stood up, rubbing his shoulder. "You've got a good arm, princess." Valora looked at the rod, then at him. "And you're good at making me act like someone else." "Good. Because from now on we're not royal and soldier anymore, just survivors." They found the control panel for the escape pod. Blake began hacking it. Sweat ran down his face as alarms grew louder. "You sure this will work?" Valora asked. "No," he replied honestly. "But I'll make it work." Seconds later, the pod door opened. Blake pulled her inside, pressed buttons, and they blasted off the warship, just as the guards burst into the cargo bay behind them. The stars rushed past the windows as the pod escaped into space. Valora looked out, breathing hard. "We're safe," she whispered. "For now," Blake said. "But trust me, they'll come." "And when they do?" she asked. Blake looked at her, eyes calm. "Then I'll be ready." The escape pod drifted through space, silent and cold. Princess Valora sat by the window, watching stars move slowly in the black sky. Her royal planet Elindra was still far away, and the warship they escaped from was already sending out hunting signals. They weren't free. They were being hunted. Beside her, Sergeant Blake Rowan was trying to fix the pod's power system. Sparks flew from the panel. His fingers were dirty, and and bleeding, but he didn't stop. "We have less than 2 hours of oxygen," he said quietly. Valora looked at him. "Can we reach a planet?" "Maybe. There's an abandoned moon nearby. It used to be a mining outpost. No life signs now, but it's our only chance." She nodded slowly. "Let's go." Blake gave a half smile and punched in the coordinates. The pod shook violently as it entered the moon's atmosphere. Fire blazed across the windows. The hull screamed from the heat. Valora grabbed onto the seat as the pod spun out of control. "Brace yourself," Blake shouted. Then impact. The pod slammed into the frozen surface of the moon. Metal screamed. Lights burst, and silence followed. Smoke filled the air. Blake coughed and pushed open the door. Snow and ash blew in his face. They had landed, but the pod was wrecked. No communication, no warmth, and the cold, it bit into their skin like knives. "We have to move," Blake said, helping Valora outside. "This place will kill us faster than any alien." They wrapped themselves in torn insulation from the pod and walked through the snow. The moon was dead. Gray skies, black mountains, and no sound. But Valora felt something strange, as if eyes were watching them. After an hour of walking, they found an old mining station. The door was broken, half covered in ice. Blake forced it open and they stepped inside. It was dark, cold, and abandoned. But they weren't alone. A small red light blinked in the corner, a motion sensor. Blake cursed under his breath. They knew we'd come here. Suddenly, a robotic voice echoed. "Unauthorized life forms detected, activating security drones." Blake grabbed Valora's hand. "Run!" Metal drones dropped from the ceiling. Their red eyes locked onto the two fugitives. Energy weapons charged. They sprinted through broken tunnels. Sparks rained down. Drones fired. Ice exploded near their feet. Blake pulled Valora behind a large crate, breathing hard. She was shivering, her hands purple from cold. I can't keep going," she whispered. Blake looked at her, really looked. Her once golden skin was pale. Her royal strength was fading. He pulled off his own jacket and wrapped it around her. "You're not allowed to give up," he said. She stared at him. "Why do you keep risking yourself for me? I'm just one girl." Blake paused. His voice was low. "Because the first time I looked in your eyes, I saw someone worth saving." Silence. Valora blinked. Her breath shook in the cold air. She leaned into him just for a second and said, "Then I won't give up. Not if you don't." Blake nodded. "Good. Now let's end these machines." He crawled to a control panel and began hacking into the old system. Sparks flew again. The drones hovered closer. Valora grabbed a broken pipe and stood by the corner. "Ready when you are," she said. Blake smiled. "Now!" She jumped out and swung the pipe, hitting one drone hard. Blake triggered the panel and overloaded the power grid. Electricity surged through the room. The drones exploded, one by one, until only silence was left. Valora dropped the pipe. Blake collapsed beside her. They laughed. It was the first real laugh either of them had in days. Later that night, they found a hidden room with working heat and a sealed door. Safe for now. They lit a small fire using old fuel cells. Valora leaned. Against the wall, her voice soft. "You should be dead, you know. Humans don't last long in alien space." Blake looked at the fire. "Maybe. But I didn't come this far to die yet." She studied him. "There's something more, isn't there? Something you lost in the war." Blake didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a small locket from his pocket. Inside, a photo. A woman and child both smiling. "My family," he whispered. "They were killed by an alien strike. I promised I wouldn't trust your kind again." Valora held her breath. "But now," Blake said, looking at her, "I'm starting to believe not all aliens are the same." Valora's throat tightened. Her heart beat faster. The cold didn't feel so strong anymore. In that ruined outpost, among firelight and shadows, something began to grow between a fallen princess and a broken soldier. Something neither expected. The night on the dead moon was silent, except for the soft crackle of fire. Blake sat alone, away from the warm glow, staring into the cold darkness. His eyes were open, but he wasn't really seeing, he was remembering. Far behind him, Velora watched carefully. She had seen warriors cry before, but only in secret, and never a human. But Blake's shoulders were trembling. She walked over slowly, her bare feet quiet on the steel floor. "Are you cold?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, just thinking." She sat beside him. The silence between them was heavy. After a while, she softly said, "The photo. You said they were your family." Blake nodded. His voice was low and rough. "My wife, my daughter, they were everything." "What happened?" Velora asked gently. He didn't answer at first. Then he spoke, his words slow like a knife cutting through old pain. "There was a peace talk between your people and mine. My wife and daughter came with me on that trip. Thought it would be safe. Thought the war was ending." He paused. "But a rogue alien fleet attacked. Said humans couldn't be trusted. They bombed the station before talks even started." Velora's heart sank. "I was outside the dome when it hit. I watched it burn. I heard their screams on the comlink, and I couldn't save them." His fists tightened. "I wanted to die that day. I begged to be sent to the worst battle zones. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to make aliens pay." He looked at Velora then, his eyes filled with something broken, something heavy. "But then I saw you, locked in that cage, looking like my daughter did, scared, alone, and I couldn't walk away." Velora blinked. Her lips trembled. She had no words, so she reached out and touched his hand. Not as a princess, not as an alien, just as someone who understood pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Blake nodded. "Me too." They sat in silence, side by side in the cold. The next day, a low hum echoed through the moon's surface. Blake woke instantly. "They're coming." Velora looked up, her heart racing. "How do you know?" He pointed to the floor. "Feel it. Vibration. A large ship's landing." They rushed, outside the station, hiding behind an icy ridge. In the sky, a massive shadow appeared. It wasn't the same ship they escaped from. This was worse. A Hunter-class cruiser. Built for tracking fugitives, it flew low, dropping off armored soldiers with sniffer drones. "They've found our trail," Blake said. "We can't fight them," Velora said, her voice tight. "We don't. We run." They raced through the ice field, dodging frozen rocks and steam vents. Blake knew they had only one chance, a collapsed mining tunnel that led to a hidden exit on the other side of the ridge, but the tunnel was dangerous. It hadn't been used in years. Still, they didn't stop. Behind them, drones flew low, scanning the snow. One spotted them and fired. Blake pulled Velora down. The laser hit the rock beside her, melting it to ash. He stood up, took aim with a stolen pistol, and shot the drone out of the sky. They dove into the tunnel just as more shots rained down behind them. Inside, it was pitch black. Only Blake's wrist light lit the way. The walls were narrow, the air thick with dust and old fumes. "Careful," he whispered. "One wrong step and this whole thing comes down." Velora nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Halfway through, the tunnel shook. A blast from above had hit the surface. Rocks tumbled. The ceiling began to crack. They ran. A giant piece of steel fell between them, separating them. "Velora!" Blake shouted. "I'm here!" she screamed from the other side. "I'm okay, but I can't move." He pounded on the steel. "I'll find another way around. Just stay calm." She pressed her hand to the cold metal, tears in her eyes. "Please come back." 10 minutes later, a hand broke through the wall beside her. It was him. Blake pulled her through the small opening he carved with a laser torch. She fell into his arms. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. He looked down at her, brushing snow from her hair. "You won't. Not while I'm still breathing." For the first time, she didn't feel like a prisoner, or a princess. She felt safe. They climbed to the surface again. In the distance, a signal tower blinked. a hope for rescue. Blake looked at her and said, "If we reach that tower, we might get off this moon." Valora nodded. "But we have to move fast," he added. She took his hand. "Then let's move." Together, they walked into the snowy winds, two souls scarred by war but stronger together, and above them, hidden in the clouds, something else was watching, something not from the Empire, and not from Earth. The wind howled like a beast as Blake and Valora moved across the frozen cliffs of the dead moon. The signal tower stood far ahead, tall, broken, and blinking, weakly like it was breathing its last breath. Valora coughed and held her side. She was bruised, weak and shivering. "Keep going," Blake whispered. "We're almost there." But they weren't alone. A shadow moved on the ridge above them. Then another. Sharp eyes watched every step. The alien hunters had landed. From the sky, a command ship circled like a hawk. On board, a general of the Zarn Dominion growled into his comms. "Do not kill the princess, bring her back. The human, he's nothing. Burn him." Just before they reached the tower, the ground exploded. Hunter ship dropped from above, cutting off their path. Soldiers in black armor stepped out, their rifles glowing. Blake pushed Valora behind him. He raised both hands slowly. "Let her go. She doesn't belong to you." The lead hunter laughed. "No, human. She doesn't belong to you either." Blake stepped forward. "I'm the one who took her. I'm the one you want." The hunter's grin faded. "Are you offering yourself?" Valora gasped. "Blake, no." He didn't look back at her. "I'll surrender. No fight. No escape. Just one condition. You let her go. You let her live." The hunters looked at each other. Then the leader nodded. "Fine. Come alone." Valora grabbed Blake's arm. "You can't do this. You'll die." He turned and gently placed her hand on his chest. "I already made peace with death the day I lost my family. But you have a kingdom to rebuild." Tears filled her eyes. "You're not a soldier anymore. You're more than that." He smiled softly. "Then let me prove it." Blake walked forward, hands raised as the hunters bound his wrists. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He only looked back at Valora once, his eyes saying goodbye without a word. Then the hunters threw him into their ship and blasted off toward orbit. Valora dropped to her knees. The tower was close now. She could call for help. She could escape. But all she could think about him was the man who had just traded his life for hers. Inside the hunter ship, Blake sat in chains, bloody and bruised. The general entered the cell and sneered. "You caused a lot of trouble, human. For a slave to steal royalty, oh, that's new." Blake lifted his head. "I didn't steal her. I saved her. You'll die screaming." Blake chuckled weakly. "Then you better start soon. I don't scream easy." The general punched him hard. Blood ran down Blake's lip. "Tell me," the general whispered. "Did she cry when you left?" Blake smiled with broken teeth. "She cried. For me. That's something you'll never earn." Back on the moon, Valora sat before the signal tower. Her hands shook as she activated it. Emergency distress. "This is Princess Valora of Ilindra. I request immediate rescue. But I also demand justice." She paused, then added, "If any part of the galaxy still believes in honor, help me save the man who saved me." She sent the signal. Then she stood, her eyes sharp and full of fire. "I will not let him die for me." Hours later, the sky tore open. A human strike cruiser appeared above the moon. It had heard the signal. Inside, an old war hero, Captain Riker, read Valora's message. He turned to his crew. "Plot a course. Target the hunter ship. No mercy." In space, Blake was being dragged to an airlock. The general sneered. "Let's see how long you last without a suit." But before they could throw him out, the ship shook violently. Alarms blared. "Enemy attack. Incoming human cruiser." Blake grinned. "Told you I don't scream." Explosions tore through the ship. Fighters clashed in the stars. Blake broke free using a stolen knife and fought his way to the lower decks. Meanwhile, Valora on the rescue ship put on body armor and picked up a blaster. "I'm going after him," she told Riker. "Your royalty," Riker warned. "That's suicide." She looked at him coldly. "Then give me a warrior's death." In the burning corridors of the hunter ship, Blake collapsed near a fallen wall. He was bleeding badly. Then, footsteps. He raised his knife weakly and froze. Valora stood there panting, armor smoking. She rushed to him, falling to her knees. "You came back," he whispered. "You fool," she said, crying. "You were never nothing. You're everything to me." She helped him up, and together, they limped toward the evac ship. As the hunter cruiser exploded behind them, the stars lit their path. They had won, not with an army, but with sacrifice and love that crossed worlds. The royal palace of Alindra was built from crystal and light. Its towers reached the clouds. Its walls shimmered under the twin suns. It had stood tall for thousands of years, but today it shook with arguments, fear, and whispers of betrayal. "The princess is alive?" the new king shouted, standing before the Grand Council. "She's returning?" asked a noble, his voice trembling. "After all this time?" The king slammed his hand on the table. "She was declared lost. I wear the crown now. I rule this world." A guard entered, eyes wide. "Your Majesty, she has landed, and she's not alone." The room fell silent. Outside, a royal ship touched down in the garden courtyard. Hundreds gathered to see the long-lost Princess Valora. When the ramp lowered, she walked down slowly, her royal gown torn, her hair unkempt, but her eyes shining with fire. By her side walked a human. Blake's arm was wrapped in a sling, his uniform dirty, his face scarred, but he stood tall beside her. The crowd gasped. Some pointed in shock. Others murmured in fear. "Is that a human soldier beside our princess? Why is she holding his hand?" "Blasphemy!" The new king stormed down the stairs. "Valora, you dare walk into my court with a human criminal?" Valora stood, firm. "He is not a criminal. He is the reason I am alive. He kidnapped you." "No," she said clearly, her voice strong. "He saved me." The king's face twisted with rage. "You bring dishonor to our bloodline. You are unfit to return." Valora stepped forward. "And you let this kingdom rot while I was gone. You sat on a throne of lies and silence." King raised his hand to strike her, then froze. A dozen soldiers stepped between them, aiming weapons. They weren't loyal to him anymore. Later that day, Valora stood before the council. "I am no longer a girl in a golden cage," she said. "I have bled, I have fought, and I have survived. But I didn't do it alone." She turned to Blake. "This human gave up his freedom for mine. He risked his life when no one else did." A council elder asked, "And now what, princess? You expect us to welcome a human into our court?" Valora didn't hesitate. "No, I don't expect it." She looked at the throne and said, "Because I no longer wish to sit there." The crowd gasped. "I give up my claim to the crown," she continued. "Let those who hunger for power keep it. I have seen too much pain. I choose a different path." The new king smirked. "Then leave, go run away with your beast." Blake stepped forward calmly. "I was once full of hate," he said, "but this world, your princess, taught me something. That trust can grow, even between enemies. That peace isn't weak, it's powerful." The council was silent. Then, slowly, an old counselor stood. "This human bled for Alindra. We cannot deny his honor." Another followed. "If peace is possible, then perhaps this is the way." One by one, the council began to nod. The king screamed, "Traitors, all of you!" But no one listened to him anymore. He was removed from the chamber by royal guards. His crown fell to the floor, rolling away into shadow. That night, Valora and Blake stood in the royal garden beneath the moonlight. "This was your home," Blake said. "You gave it all up." Valora smiled softly. "I never wanted gold or titles. I wanted freedom. I wanted to choose. She touched his hand. And I chose you. He looked down at her, surprised. You sure about that? I'm not exactly royal. Material. You're the only one who treated me like a person, she whispered. Not a prize, not a symbol, just me. Blake didn't speak. He just pulled her into a quiet embrace. The stars above Alindra shined brighter than ever. In a galaxy torn by war, two hearts from opposite worlds had found peace, not in thrones or crowns, but in each other. And from that moment on, their story became more than survival. It became legend. A golden sky stretched across Alindra as the suns began to set. Thousands had gathered at the royal horizon, the place where peace treaties were signed, where war was once declared, and now, where something unexpected would be remembered forever. They weren't here for a new king. They were here for her. Princess Velora stood on the marble platform, no longer dressed in royal robes. She wore simple white cloth, her crown replaced with a silver band tied gently across her forehead. Beside her stood Blake Rowan. No medals, no armor, just a soldier's jacket and tired eyes. But when she looked at him, she saw more than a warrior. She saw her beginning again. She turned to the crowd and spoke. I was born into a palace, but I learned how to live in a cage. I was raised to rule, but I never learned how to be free. Until a human gave everything to save me. People murmured. Even the elders sat quietly listening. He had no reason to help me, she continued. He owed me nothing. He could have left me, but he didn't, and I will never forget. She paused and looked at Blake. I walked away from a crown, not because I was weak, but because I finally saw what real strength looked like. Blake looked down, trying not to show emotion, but his hands were shaking. Velora stepped forward again. We talk of peace, of trust, of unity, but those words are nothing until someone chooses to live them. He lived them. The crowd was silent now, then she said loud and clear, I offer him not just my thanks, I offer him my bond. Gasps, whispers. Even Blake froze. She turned to him. In Alindran tradition, a soul bond is sacred. It means trust without borders, loyalty without force, love without fear. Blake looked into her eyes. Velora, I'm not one of your kind. I don't have royal blood. You're everything I need, she interrupted, her voice shaking. A tear ran down her cheek, the last tear she would shed for her old life. Blake stepped forward, gently wiped it away and whispered, Then let it be real. The stars burned brighter that night. A fire dance was lit across the palace sky. Thousands of Alindrans and human guests from allied planets gathered together. For the first time in history, enemies stood side by side, not to fight, but to celebrate. The princess and the soldier sat by the edge of the lake that reflected the starlight. He took her hand. No regrets? He asked. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Only that I didn't meet you sooner. But their story didn't end there. Months later, they stood together at a new station, built between Earth and Alindra. It wasn't just a military base or trade port. It was a bridge, a symbol of two worlds finally learning to trust. Blake trained new peacekeepers. Velora led missions for rebuilding lost colonies. They worked side by side, day by day, heart by heart. Some still judged them, some still whispered, but they didn't care. Because they had already survived worse. Because they had already chosen each other. Because love, real love, needed no crown. Epilogue. In an ancient archive across the stars, a small child once asked her teacher, Is the story of the princess and the human soldier true? The teacher smiled and opened an old hologram book. It wasn't just true, she said. It was the first step toward peace in the galaxy. The child leaned closer. Did they live happily ever after? The teacher looked up at the stars. They lived bravely ever after. And sometimes that's even better.